the effort of the national security state to re-engage the American public in an anti-Chinese, anti-Russian, more prosaic battle of drones is typical of the diversion activity engaged in by our national security state. If our population starts to become more and more aware of and more convinced of the reality of a UFO visitation that's going on our planet by extraterrestrial beings, is going to enable our people to kind of transcend the anti-Russian, anti-Chinese rhetoric of our Defense Department.
My name is Danny Sheehan. I'm a constitutional litigator who's worked some of the most important cases in modern American history. From Pentagon Papers, the Watergate scandal, to Iran-Contra. My legal career has led me now to this pivotal moment. As our human family confronts the implications of the existence here on our planet of extraterrestrial or extra-dimensional non-human species. I will be your guide as we dive into the profound philosophical, theological, and public policy questions pertaining to the UFO phenomenon, alien life, and the citizen movement for disclosure. This is the Full Disclosure Podcast, coming to you from the New Paradigm Institute on SpectraVision Radio.
We are now in the sixth week of the official shutdown of our United States government, therefore exceeding the previous record. And now this is the longest shutdown of our United States government in our entire 236-year history. Because of the shutdown, there are a number of major events taking place in the United States that probably cause people to be wondering, why is it, in light of all the travail that's going on in the world right now, we're still talking about the UFO issue? For example, there are now some 42 million people that are on the verge of losing most of their food supplements from the federal government. There's 42 million people that get the federal Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. The Trump administration has ordered the cutting off of all of those funds as of November 1st. There are two federal court opinions that have been entered now commanding that he give at least some portion of this to the people. And so they're now getting only 50% of their food needs met. And as of the end of this week, there's going to be some 14 million of these people that are totally cut off from all supplemental food costs. On October 29th, President Trump has ordered the initiation of a brand new round of nuclear weapons testing the component elements of our nuclear detonators in response to what he asserts to be Russia's continued activities in the Ukraine. And President Putin, of course, continues to ignore this and is continuing to rain down bombs on Kyiv and other portions of the Ukraine. And Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu on October 28th ordered a powerful set of new airstrikes into Gaza, complaining that Hamas had delivered the remains of a person who was not really one of the hostages that had been killed during the long bombing of Gaza by the Israelis. And President Donald Trump has just ordered the USS carrier group, the Gerald Ford aircraft carrier and the battle group, into the waters off Venezuela, now with 4,500 United States military troops on board, 2,000 of whom are, in fact, especially trained United States Marines capable of land invasions. And clearly, this is appearing to all experts to be a beginning of a potential attempt to overthrow the government of Venezuela. This is all during the course of the second largest hurricane in all of recorded history, proceeding to wipe out most of Jamaica. Our planet is now being visited more and more regularly and more consistently by UFOs, which are now confirmed by our United States government to be a non-human origin extraterrestrial spacecraft piloted by non-human beings. They are going around our planet, actually shutting off nuclear power plants, shutting off nuclear weapons, missiles, and even disabling entire carrier groups of the United States military. This is an extraordinarily important strategic dynamic that's going on now, while our government leaders, both in Russia and the United States and in certain allies, such as Israel and others, are continuing these activities to totally destabilize the international global order that has now for some 80 years maintained the peace with regard to nuclear weapons on our planet. The six most recently reported news events of the UFO issue seem to kind of pale, in some people's view, to these major strategic events that are going on around the world, threatening potential nuclear war between the United States and Russia, or between Russia and our NATO allies. But we want to point out here today that the major UFO news items that have been reported over the course of the last week since we last met directly impinge upon this major issue of the potential nuclear destabilization of our planet. The first and most important of these is that on Friday, October 31st, Dan Farah, who is the producer and director of the new 2-hour-long documentary film, Age of Disclosure, appeared on the Bill Maher show on Netflix and the CNN network, and had a major conversation with Bill Maher about the content of this new documentary film that is going to be premiered on November 21st. This was an important revelation to the people in the United States that there was such a new documentary that has some 34 people, all with above top secret clearances of our United States government, directly on camera. One of them has acknowledged that has been in direct physical presence and seen with his own eyes a confirmed non-human origin extraterrestrial spacecraft recovered here on our planet, and that he has seen with his own eyes the non-human beings that were occupants of this craft. Others have asserted in detail their firsthand knowledge of the fact that our United States government is involved in an ultra-secret covert operation retrieving UFOs, indeed calling them in and potentially bringing them down forcibly and capturing the occupants of these craft who are confirmed to be non-human. This is an extraordinary documentary film, and it takes one full additional step into the process of disclosure over and above the testimony that's been now received by the United States House of Representatives. We now have information that the United States Senate is potentially contemplating holding additional public hearings in the beginning of 2026 to reveal new witnesses to add to this major process of disclosure. Our New Paradigm Institute is going to be rallying people from the Citizens for Disclosure all across the country between now and November 21st to get them to hold watch parties, gatherings of their friends and neighbors and family to gather around the television sets on November 21st, because in addition to the opening of this Age of Disclosure documentary film in 3 major cities in the theater, this 2-hour documentary is going to be aired on Amazon Prime that same evening of November 21st. So people can actually tune in to Amazon Prime, just broadcast it to your friends and neighbors. Then there are a series of 4 more stories that are taking place, which have this overtone of being UFO-related stories, but that upon deeper analysis, you'll see are not really UFO-related at all. For example, Avi Loeb, the head of the astronomy department at Harvard University, continues to speculate that the 3-eye Atlas, rather bizarre comet that is just now rounding our sun and heading back past Jupiter out into interstellar space might well be some type of extraterrestrial spacecraft manned by intelligent beings. It's evident that this is not the case, and yet this is being speculated about instead of just a story of a comet coming into our solar system being flogged as a potential extraterrestrial spacecraft. But it's not a UFO. The fact is that the entire astronomical community has been studying this particular craft and have confirmed with close-up photographs of it that this is very clearly a comet that is following the normal pathways now, heading back into outer space. That is clearly overwhelming evidence that this is in fact, a simple comet. The report by George Knapp on October 30th over his Las Vegas ABC Channel 8 of the update on the cover-up of a September 23rd UAP crash retrieval near the Area 51 site in Nevada. This, too, is a distraction from real UFO reporting, because the reality is that it was clearly an asset, a man-made asset from Area 51 that had crashed back in September of 2025. They now show how the procedure is undertaken to carve out a whole protected area around a crash site, issue false statements about it, to cover over the site, to remove any kind of sign of the debris, etc. This is the exact same kind of cover-up activity that's undertaken with regard to non-human origin UFOs. And so in that sense, it was an example of how they deploy. But the reality is they have direct intercepted radio communications that were going on the site at Area 51, explicitly acknowledging that this was one of their assets. They were deploying a team from inside Area 51 to go retrieve it. Ross Coulthard has recovered a document that's been issued by the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation of the United States Justice Department, directing private military contractors and the owners and managers of facilities that are deemed to be militarily sensitive installations around the country, such as railroads and air stations and others that may be involved in military activities, that they are now to report any sightings of drones overflying their facilities, as well as the Defense Department facilities, indicating that the FBI is now opening potential criminal investigations of these. In the memo, in the flyer that was issued, that Ross Coulthard has gotten a copy of, they begin to conflate UFOs, UAPs, and this new category that they've designated under FBI. They're calling it UXSs, which include drones and UAPs. So that they've now got a new obfuscation. In addition to changing the classic UFO designation into UAPs, first unidentified aerial phenomenon, and then they changed it to unidentified anomalous phenomenon that include all kinds of things that are non-airborne, such as Bigfoot and other weird phenomenon that are going on. This is just an attempt on the part of the Defense Department and the intelligence agencies to obfuscate the general issue of what a UFO is and what the UFOs are actually doing. The Belgian military reporting these drone sightings coming in over their military facilities is just another story sort of capping off this week's reports of drones, sort of flash mobbing military sites. They're conflating these as though they're the same thing as UFOs, whereas they know perfectly well that there's more prosaic explanations for these drones. There is a new app that is established to report regularly on unidentified submerged objects. Richard Dolan has released now his second volume of his 3-volume account of unidentified submerged objects. And this particular app has now reported since its beginning in August. The first report is that there are now been 9,000 reports of sightings of USOs coming out of or entering into the water. You'll see that there are these other stories that are being kind of feathered in to the entire kind of UFO community, reporting things that are clearly drones. And there's an attempt to draw the people's attention to this drone issue, many of which may well be United States military drones, testing potentially the surveillance systems at our various military facilities. There are more and more of these genuine UFOs being sighted now, and USOs, which are UFOs that simply go underwater. That this particular phenomenon that is going on right now is of extraordinary importance. There's this high level of coincidence between the reporting of all of these major drone sightings in December of 2024, for example, immediately following after the November 13th testimony in Congress on the part of Lou Elizondo, explicitly telling the United States Congress that the Roswell crash was absolutely real, confirming that we're absolutely in possession of non-human origin spacecraft and the bodies of non-humans that have been recovered from the spacecraft. And all of a sudden you have this big flap of drones appearing within the month. In light of the reporting of a half a dozen stories about drones coming and going, all in the context of trying to redirect attention away from this sort of transcendent issue of UFOs appearing on our planet, and directing the public's attention to this kind of prosaic surveillance operation that's going on allegedly against our facilities, which are being attributed to Russia or potentially Chinese spy balloons. This is a very typical effort on the part of the national security state, directing the attention of the American public to these kind of military situations involving China or Russia, whom our national security state infrastructure want to direct hostile energy toward. This extraordinary event of an increased number of UFOs appearing on our planet and engaged in shutting off nuclear missiles at our nuclear missile bases and immobilizing aircraft carrier battle groups. This is a demonstration on the part of the UFO people that they are extremely concerned about our nuclear weapons capacity and our continuing escalation toward a potential thermonuclear conflict on our planet. And the effort of the national security state to direct its attention away from that, to re-engage the American public in an anti-Chinese, anti-Russian, more prosaic battle of drones is typical of the diversion activity engaged in by our national security state. Whereas we're attempting at the New Paradigm Institute to emphasize the transcendent nature of the actual UFO events that are taking place on our planet right now, because it's extraordinarily important for people to understand that if our population starts to become more and more aware of and more convinced of the reality of a UFO visitation that's going on our planet by extraterrestrial beings, this is something that is going to enable our people to kind of transcend the anti-Russian, anti-Chinese rhetoric of our Defense Department and our military installations now. As the leaders of Russia and the United States engage in more and more reckless activity toward each other, this is a highly unstable situation. But we need to keep our eye on the ball and understand that we all need to mobilize and work hard to get full disclosure of the reality of the UFO phenomenon so that we can, in fact, get access to the alternative sources of energy that are implied in the UFO sightings, and keep our eye on this particular endeavor that we're engaged in the UFO disclosure movement. Thank you very much. This is Dan Sheehan, and this has been the Full Disclosure Podcast.
To join the citizen movement for disclosure, visit newparadigminstitute.org/take action.